LearningMeasure.tv, a science and engineering podcast with emphasis on measurement, brought to you by David Archer and LearningMeasure.com. Episode 48, Abhilasha Wadwha. Hello, I'm David Archer, owner of LearningMeasure.com and LearningMeasure.tv. LearningMeasure.com is a subscription-based training site where when you register as a student, you have access to the student site and you can take a number of courses that are marked free in the course catalog. To access the other courses, you have to pay a subscription fee of $5 a month or $60 a year. A lot has happened since the last podcast. We have been hacked, if you may have noticed. And also since then, I've changed my day job and a few other things. So it's been a while since we've done the last podcast. Some things that has happened since the last podcast: we have a new LinkedIn group associated with this podcast and with LearningMeasure.com, and a few other things. Since the last time, we had put some more courses in the catalog. These include Radar 103, the radar equation; Physics 52, Introduction to Force, Momentum, Work, and Energy; Measurement 150, Introduction to Angular Measurement; and Measurement 452, Gain Extrapolation Antenna Measurements. In this episode, we're going to do an interview on the subject of residential carbon footprint.
Yeah, today we're going to talk to Abhi from Energy Conservation Group. She did her master's on this subject we're going to talk about, which is, well, you tell us what it is.
Well, it's residential carbon footprint and its analysis.
So, first of all, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I come from a background in environment-conscious design, in architecture. I did my undergrad in India and worked with a lot of firms that work on sustainable development issues. In 2005, I got a scholarship to come to UNLV and do my master's. I finished that in 2007 and started working in the Las Vegas Valley. My master's thesis, which I want to talk about today, that we are trying to develop commercially now, is on residential carbon footprint analysis. It is basically a bottom-up approach to look at consumer energy use and tie it into the regional goals.
So, how did you get your data? How did you make the measurements?
The data came from working with the utility providers. The biggest challenge that the utility industry and the monitoring industry, of which smart meters and smart grids are a part of, the biggest challenge that they are facing today is how to not lose trust with the consumers about their proprietary information. What this tool does is it uses non-proprietary data in such a manner that the usefulness is still retained, and at the same time you are able to form strategic planning goals for the entire region, but also give a close enough snapshot of your own personal consumptive energy use without using your utility bills directly, and without having you to input any parameters about your house. Like if you go to online carbon calculators, it's a long drawn process which most people don't do once a year. Even that, a lot of them don't do. What this tool does is it sort of takes away the hard work of that and lets you look at your energy use and compare it to your neighbors without any effort.
And what else does the place you work for do other than that analysis?
At Energy Conservation Group, we are ResNet raters, and we are BPI training providers. This is one of the few groups in the valley where raters will submit their energy audits for QA/QC before it is being submitted to the residential energy services network. So while we also have our own raters on board, and these raters will do energy audits for your home. For those who don't know, an energy audit is basically an analysis of your home in which the rater will tell you exactly where you're losing money on energy use, if there are leaks in your house, or even if there is mold and safety concerns in the house that need to be addressed. So he'll give you a comprehensive report about what should be done to save energy and have a healthy environment in your house.
Is there is it most of the things you do really expensive, or is it easy to do for a lot of things?
The energy audit itself is not super expensive, especially nowadays. There is a lot of rebate money being given for energy audits.
But okay, let's say you have your audit and they come up with recommendations. What are some typical recommendations?
Some of the typical recommendations would be like weather stripping your windows, probably adding insulation on your roof in case the auditor feels that that would be a good way to go. Probably putting some radiant heat barriers if there is a lot of west-facing sun that is increasing your energy use. Looking at your appliance usage and the health of your appliances, whether they're tuned properly or not. They typically do a blower door test, which determines if there is air leakage happening from your house. It basically looks at the air in and air out, which needs to be the same. If there is a difference in that, then they will point out where the leakages are and how you could seal them. They will also look at the condition of your ducts, if your ducts are sealed properly, or if they require extra insulation. They also will look at any kind of asbestos, which is rare now, but still asbestos, lead. These are primary concerns. These are health concerns which just cannot be ignored. They will also do combustion safety tests to see if there's any kind of gas leakage from your gas stoves.
So, okay. I guess we'll go on to our little talk.
Yep.
We'll see you in a second.
Hope you enjoy it.
Okay, so now we're going to do a little presentation from Abhilasha Wadwha. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Okay, and we'll see how that goes. Let's give it a try.
Okay. So in short, you can call me Abhi. That will save you much heartache. I want to talk about this residential carbon footprint analysis tool that I developed as a part of my master's research in architecture at UNLV. What the tool does is, it's a GIS mapping tool that looks at residential energy usage on a street-by-street basis, so that when you map each street and look at the average energy use, and you look at it overall, you can now figure out consumptive hotspots. And from a planner and a city official level, now you have this roadmap to figure out where your rebate efforts should be targeted so that there's maximum return on investment. And if you are a consumer, as in a citizen, then you can compare your energy use to your neighboring street, to your neighborhood, to your zip code, your city, and so on and so forth, so that it gives you a very accurate benchmark of where you stand against a local carbon footprint. So what I want to show is, first, why is this important? Like, what are the current energy consumption trends in the area? Which zip codes are higher in consumption? If we don't have some kind of an evaluation to measure ourselves against, then as I said before, there's no strategic action plan that you can put together. And what is the relationship between, say, the age of a dwelling? We all know that older dwellings have older technology, but what is the exact relationship statistically between the age and the size of a dwelling should we just blindly assume that because the national figures point to a certain direction, it's also true for Las Vegas, even though we know our valley is very unique in its history and in what short period it came about. So after that, you want to find out, once you have this analysis, what should be your next steps. So basically the data collection method was talking to utilities and understanding how their database works and how you can strip off proprietary information and make it into non-proprietary data, while at the same time retaining as many characteristics of the property as possible so that you can use them for analysis. Gas, electricity, square footage data was collected, some of it from assessor's office, some of it from the utilities. There's a map here which shows how the valley grew. The blue parts show all of the dwellings before 1980, which are mostly towards the center of the valley. And then the orange, the brown, and the red show how the valley grew over time, which is towards the periphery. Then you overlap that with a kilowatt hour, just a kilowatt hour per dwelling unit map. And we kind of see that, okay, the older units actually have a lesser carbon footprint. So in terms of kilowatt hour per dwelling unit, they are doing much better than some of their newer counterparts. Then you start looking at the hotspots, and now you can mark trends about whether it's the periphery where the highest is, or sometimes there might be an anomaly and some of them might be in the center. Now we utilize the square footage data and do these same maps for kilowatt hour per square foot. So roughly we are speaking of efficiency of a dwelling now, because we know that older dwellings might be smaller, so arguably that's why their carbon footprint is less. How about if we look at efficiency? Now we find out some of the newer dwellings actually may not be as efficient. Some of the dwellings towards the outside, which are bigger but are also inefficient per square footage. Now this starts giving us very interesting patterns. It breaks the anomaly that newer dwellings should not get retrofit monies first. When you overlap these two, now you can look at high consumption and low efficiency zip codes. So our target now is to focus on dwellings which are worst in both, which are high in consumption in terms of kilowatt hour per dwelling unit, but which are also low in efficiency in terms of kilowatt hour per square foot. When you filter these out, then you can start picking out zip codes which are doing worst in both, and these now become high priority zip codes or high priority neighborhoods. Let's look at the street scale analysis. When you look at the neighborhood scale patterns, now this tool, the carbon footprint analysis tool, helps you to zoom down onto your street level. What you're seeing here is the level of detail that you'll be able to see when this tool is fully deployed. Each street is color-coded to show its effective carbon footprint locally. The carbon footprint is calculated based on the way that state is producing electricity. So depending on the fuel mix, the carbon coefficient will change. So the carbon coefficient is basically a conversion of kilowatt hour to tons of carbon dioxide, and this changes year to year, and this is what the states manage within their portfolio standards. So if the coefficient went low, if they started producing electricity with more renewable energy sources, even without your doing anything, your carbon footprint will reduce. But the challenge is to take demand side efforts and make people reduce their consumption. That's called demand side management. And then also do supply side management and make those two come together so that you're reaching your target goals. So once again, here we are looking at kilowatt hour per dwelling unit map. A similar map is now produced for kilowatt hour per square foot for every street, so that you can look at the comparison between your dwelling's carbon footprint as well as, once again, softly speaking, your dwelling's efficiency in comparison to your neighborhood. What you see on the right side is a scale which shows
where the Las Vegas metro area stands. The green is where Las Vegas averages, and the blue is where the US averages. So anyway, Las Vegas dwellings consume 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide more than the average US dwelling. And when you pick out your street color, then you can see how many stop points above the Las Vegas average or below your average street consumption is at. So this scale on the right is crafted so that when you look at it, you can see yourself in comparison to your zip code, your city, the state of Nevada, and US average. Here what we are doing is we are analyzing the efficiency factor. So to give an exaggerated example, think of all the electricity supplied to the valley as one number. Now if we can break that down and look at the electricity which is consumed by only the dwellings which were built between 1980 and 84, that's a part of it. Similarly, dwellings built between 85 to 89, that's another group, so on and so forth. Now if we look at that pie and divide it by age of construction, then we can analyze which group of dwellings is doing worse than the other group of dwellings. So say an exaggerated example. Say suppose of all the electricity supplied to the valley, 20% is being used by dwellings constructed between 80 to 84, which only make 5% of all the dwellings in Las Vegas. This is exaggerated, but what I'm trying to say is that when you subtract these numbers and you graph them, you can look at the efficiency factor of dwellings by age group. And what we find is that for the Las Vegas metro area, the lowest efficiency is for the dwellings built between 1980 and 84. Now, target reductions needed. When we have analyzed the data so far, now we are able to set up target reduction goals based on our overall strategic plan, because we know what the overall carbon footprint of the valley is. But now we are able to give specific goals to each neighborhood based on what the mayor's goal might be or what the state energy office might have set as the state of Nevada's goal. Now each neighborhood knows what is the target reduction they're supposed to achieve, instead of it being a random number like, oh, if I change my light bulbs, I'm probably doing well, and I recycle, so the onus is off me. This way, you know a concrete kilowatt hour number that you're supposed to achieve, and you can confidently say that that ties in to the regional goal of your city, the state goal, and hopefully when programs like these become standardized across the nation, then all the way up to the US level, so that now we are all part of one calculating pyramid. So as the Nevada carbon coefficient was 0.759 tons of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour, once again the emphasis here is on reductions through conservation efforts, which is demand side management, but also trying to get this carbon coefficient number down at the production level of electricity, so that if supply side efforts start reducing the carbon we produce per kilowatt hour, then both the goals can be effectively met. Future directions, 15% more energy is consumed by the average Las Vegas residents as compared to the national average. 2.5 tons more of carbon dioxide per dwelling as compared to national average. 7% of Las Vegas dwellings consume 20% of electricity supplied to the valley. So this is like the top cream. If we knew where the top pockets are, and if we merely reduced their consumption by 10%, which is really low-hanging fruit. If you talk to energy raters, or if you even go online onto your utility providers program, 10% reduction is very easy to do. It doesn't even require a large amount of investment. But a mere 10% reduction can reduce the overall Las Vegas consumption by 18%, only if we knew where to focus. So here we look at a map of the entire Las Vegas Valley. Each of the streets are shown here. Each of the streets are coded according to their actual energy consumption in 2005. And now we can start looking at hotspots, where exactly these high consumption neighborhoods lie. So now we can mark zip codes of high priority in each of the cities, critical zip codes with high consumption and low efficiency, priorities for each of the cities, what they should focus on, and target reductions. When this work was completed, the Kyoto Protocol was taken as a target, which meant 10% reduction of 1990 consumption levels for Las Vegas, and that had resulted in a number of 15% reduction per year for the next 4 years. These numbers would need to be recalculated now because, once again, not any strategic efforts have been put into place since the last 3 years. We are also doing a small public outreach effort. This is just a way of web enabling our tool. What we see here is it's a small website called baselineco2.com. Right now, it doesn't have any search functionality. We are using all the free resources we can find. This uses Google Maps API. If you go on the website, it shows a small sample of a zip code. And if you click on any of the streets, it brings up a pop-up on which you can see your kilowatt hour per dwelling, your carbon footprint from that, your carbon footprint per square foot, and separately from gas consumption and so on. We are hoping that once we get the appropriate grant funds, we can turn this at least into a regional tool where each individual can go and click on this street, on their street, and find out where their consumption stands. Thank you very much.
All right. So what was the website again?
It's baselineco2.com.
And who are you working with for doing this?
Energy conservation group.
Okay. And what do they do?
They are actually energy auditors. So they train people and then also go and do audits at homes so that they will give you a synopsis of where you could reduce energy in your house.
Okay. Well, thanks for that presentation. We're back in a second.
That's it for this episode. If you have any questions about this or any other topic, send us an email at questions@learningmeasure.com or .tv. If you have any suggestions, send us a question at suggestions@learningmeasure.tv. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/learningmeasure. We'll see you next time.